1339. That's the nothing personal word of the day. It is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. 13 of 39. That is what Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving shot for the Dallas Mavericks as they were at home last night trying to complete a sweep of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And much to the delight of the three-piece suit wearing Alex Rodriguez, sitting behind the basket, first row, kitty corner, sort of like Mark Cuban seats, but on the other side, cheering like crazy, the T-Wolves extended the series and made the Mavericks get on a plane and fly back to Minnesota for a Game 5. My level of disappointment exists on many levels regarding last night's game, not the least of which is that I guaranteed a Dallas victory because Boston had already won and Dallas needed the rest. Luka's tired, hurting. The NBA Finals don't start until June 6th, next Thursday. It would be perfect for them to have swept the T-Wolves. They were already at home. I would have told my team, don't bother bringing your suitcase. We're closing them out. And then there's that shooting performance. Anthony Edwards went off. Very good player. If you're not watching the series, you're missing not the next Michael Jordan. You're missing a very, very good player come into his own. You're missing a series that is fun to watch, interesting, two good teams. But what the hell? The NBA is so interesting to me because it's just a shooting league now. The team that shoots the best is going to win each game. You can't expect Luka and Kyrie to have 3 more games. It's not like this is going to be Boston in last year's Eastern Conference Finals where they beat the Heat 3 games in a row and then lost in Game 7 at home. I guess that's what Minnesota could do. They could win 3 in a row and then they get a home Game 7. Everyone's saying, my God, first time ever. No team's ever come back from 3-0. A-Rod standing there cheering, talking about the Red Sox beating the Yankees in 2004. I'm telling you guys, you can do this. It's 3-1. Just win the game at home. 3-2. We just got to steal one in Game 6, and then we're home for Game 7. Piece of cake. I'm watching Karl Anthony Towns get in stupid foul trouble. I'm watching Scott Foster become the story of the game. People talk about Angel Hernandez yesterday. Scott Foster, who is an accomplished NBA referee, he goes to the replay terminal more than any other referee I've ever seen. Stan Van Gundy and Reggie Miller were all over him last night, how bad it is for the game, how boring it is watching replay when things can be decided way faster. You know, as an executive, we think about that stuff. We know what broadcasters are saying because we're listening. I used to watch on mute a lot, but we would always have somebody listening because we wanted to know if broadcasters were saying something wrong. We wanted to know if they were sullying our team in any way. We wanted to know if they needed to be corrected or if we needed to speak to them or their bosses. So somebody's listening. I mean, listen, Jeff Van Gundy lost his job because of this. Somebody's listening to Stan Van Gundy and Reggie Miller in the league office, absolutely sullying the league for how long it takes Scott Foster and how much screen time the guy gets. There's no question it has an impact. The league doesn't want that sort of negativity spoken about during a game, but it's so true. It breaks up the flow. I don't know. I just would tell you this as a fan of the NBA, as a basketball connoisseur, as a Luka lover, as a Kyrie convert. Dallas is winning this series. The fact that Minnesota was able to get a game, now it's just going to be maybe a gentleman's sweep. There was a stat in the Ranger-Panther game, and I forgot to call you, Coca. I tried to take a screenshot. You want to talk about what a boomer is? I'm going to tell you what a boomer is. A boomer is taking a picture of the screen because you want to remember a stat. And you don't get to your camera in time. And so you end up getting a picture. I'm going to go to recently deleted, which can be very dangerous on live television. But I will go to the recently deleted photo and see where it is. And this is what I got. I don't know if you can see this on camera. I got nothing. The ice It was off center. That is where, if you're not watching, I'm pointing to my phone, where the stat showed up. And by the time I could figure out the camera, point, shoot, it was off the screen. And so I just deleted the photo because it's totally useless. Speaking of which, go to recently deleted, and you got to delete from there within 30 days. Little Apple IT note. So the stat was how bad home teams have been in the NHL playoffs. It used to mean something. And I can't possibly bring it up more because it's the most important thing about a regular season. The only reason you play a regular season, other than local revenue and gate revenue, is you want home court advantage, home ice advantage, home field advantage. That's the point. We make a big deal of it. They've clinched home field through the conference championships in the NFL. This team's clinched. They will have every chance, including through the finals, if you're in the NBA, to have home court advantage. Baseball, home court in the World Series used to be decided on the All-Star game result after the Bud Selig shrug with the All-Star game in Milwaukee that year. Then it would switch off American League, National League. Now it's based on record. So best record in baseball, you get to have the home field advantage in the 7-game series of the World Series. But when there's no discernible statistical advantage, if I'm running a team and I've got a little issue with Luka's knee, it's barking, or there's some baseball player, he's just a little hurt, playing too many games in a row, I'm resting him. I don't care about the 65-game rule in basketball. I don't care about stats or batting championships. I mean, it's cool for the media guide. It's cool for the first game of the next season when you can present the trophy or a piece of jewelry saying, congratulations, you won the batting title, Hanley, at 342. I wonder whether he still wears that necklace. We got him. I don't know if we have a picture of this. We got Hanley Ramirez the biggest necklace of all time and gave it to him opening day when he won the batting title. It's the biggest piece of bling. I'd say it was 4 by 2, 4 inches across, 2 inches high, with 342 in diamonds. I guarantee Hanley hasn't hocked that yet. He's got it. We got to celebrate it. But you know what? I don't even think it mattered. We didn't get to play in October that year when he did it. So I'm just thinking to myself that it was very old school to pick the Mavericks last night when I knew the NBA needed a longer series. Anything the NBA could do to get more games, since they're already in danger of having at most 16 games out of the 21. So the Mavs lose. Now they got to fly to Minnesota today. God, does that stink for the traveling secretary. Just terrible. You had the hotel reservations done. You so badly want to cancel. The charter's waiting. You know your schedule. They fly out the next day. Today's the off day. But you assume you're not going. The Panthers get to go to New York for tomorrow's Game 5. Who's excited about that? A third straight overtime game in that Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know how it gets more exciting. If you're not watching NHL playoffs, you ought to be. The Panthers won that game in overtime, tying the series. It's a simple 2 out of 3 to make it to the Stanley Cup. That's it. If you asked the Rangers and Panthers when the season started, would you take 2 out of 3 for the Cup? The answer is to get to the Stanley Cup, to get to the finals. Of course, they're there. It's hard to think that the Rangers aren't completely overmatched, but in hockey, good goaltending can get you there. I learned what shot attempts were versus shots on goal. I thought there was a mistake. I don't know if you ever do this. Sometimes it happens in Amsterdam, or when you're doing something in the 80s with pencil shavings, where you're watching a game and something happens and it doesn't look right, feel right, or seem right. So you assume that the TV station made the mistake or the announcers made the mistake and that you're a brilliant person. There was a stat with the Rangers and Panthers game where it showed, I think it was game 3, that the Panthers had like 100 shots, what I thought was on goal. And I said, it can't be. Obviously, there's a mistake, and I can't believe nobody's caught it. But they kept mentioning it and mentioning. I was like, I can't believe these broadcasters. It didn't occur to me that I was the one who was wrong, because why would I ever be wrong? I'm a total hockey connoisseur. And then it said shots attempted. And I remember saying, what are they doing? What is shots attempted? Apparently, that's a whole new stat, and I'm happy to tell you that I'm learning. I am getting into the NHL fan knowledge pipeline. I guess a shot attempted, I'm going to be wrong on this. I was wrong on natural hat trick. I guess shot attempted is, hey, I took the puck, I shot it in the general direction. When there's an empty net and you fling it down ice and it misses the goal, is that a shot attempted? I guess you're attempting to shoot. Our resident hockey genius, Sarah, may have an answer for this. Maybe. I don't know if she does. But if she does have an answer, I wouldn't mind it. Because the Panthers were dominant if you're measuring shots attempted. All right, let's go to our nothing personal pick of the day, if you don't mind, Coco, because we have so much to get to. We had a tough day. We had the Mavs -2 over the Wolves, which I assumed was a guarantee. And we had the Dodgers over the Mets in game 1. The Dodgers did beat the Mets. The Dodgers swept the Mets, actually. Doubleheader. There was a rainout from the night before. So the Dodgers ended their losing streak. They've now won 2 in a row. There's nothing as good as playing the Mets when you need to get a win. And it wasn't even Glasnow over Quintana. It was Glasnow over McGill, who pitched great. But the bullpen blew it. So we went 1-1. We are now 73-82. Let's get to our pick today because it will transition perfectly into our question of the day. So our pick today is the White Sox. Hard to believe since the White Sox never win. But the Chicago White Sox are getting 145 from the Toronto Blue Jays and Alek Manoah. So we will talk about that. But the nothing personal pick of the day, White Sox plus 145 over Manoah. Coca, not often do we get questions, whether it's on davidsamsonpodcast.com or on Twitter at David P. Samson or on Instagram, that are so spot on perfect, that fit in with what we're doing in the show. But today we did.
You know what I want? I want to talk to Samson.
So you want to talk to Samson. That's when you get on davidsamsonpodcast.com, ask a question, or on Twitter. And sometimes I answer directly. Sometimes I don't. I try to get to as many as I can. Other times you'll make it on the show. Hello, nothing personal team. I love that. We don't get a lot of people saying that. So shout out to you for saying hi to Coca, saying hi to Sarah. We're a team, folks. David, I'm hoping you can answer a question for me regarding the Blue Jays. Side note, Coca, are you aware how big we are in Canada? I know you are, given the percentage of people who watch us and listen to us from Canada. But what an amazing upset that Quebec loves nothing personal. Of course, Ontario does too, but who would have thunk it? I'm hoping you can answer a question for me regarding the Blue Jays. How long do you wait before you start making moves? I don't understand why they haven't done anything to try and better themselves this season. Secondly, when is it time to let go of a general manager? I'm pretty sure Ross Atkins has a contract ending in 26, but it seems to me he's not doing anything to make this team better. And I wouldn't want him in charge of a rebuild if it comes to that. Thanks so much. Love the show. I was aching, not with Blair and Barker, but on nothing personal. I was aching to do a breakdown of the Blue Jays, to talk about the fact that I thought they'd win the division, and right now they are 11 games back of the Yankees. To talk about the fact that they were a dangerous team in the playoffs. They're 5 games back in the third wild card. To talk about the fact that there should be a level of, hey, we got to do it nowness, given that Guerrero is in his final year of arbitration next year. Biggio, final year of arbitration. They only have 1 year left of Bichette, 2 years left of Springer, who stinks. This window, it's now. It is so upsetting when you are the president of a team and you know you've created a window, you know you've got talent, and you know that this is the end of the window, and then you have a crappy season. Raise your hand if you've been through it as an executive. Yes, I did wear Sure so far today. Curbs the schwitz during the show. I don't use Sure. I think it's Dove. It's Dove. Although I'm not going to say what it is because they're not sponsors. I basically do something that makes me smell tasty and not schwitz. When you create a team, you create it knowing exactly how long the window is. You're not sure when it's going to hit, which is why you have to be ready to win before you thought it was your window, the way the Diamondbacks had to get ready last year. That was their time. Then they added, and now the Rangers, they sign all the players, they win the World Series, and they're having a tough time this year. But they do have a ring, so that worked. Simeon Seager worked. Blue Jays, when you create a team, when you have players, you bring them up at the same time, you're watching them progress, you're evaluating them, you have in your mind, because you're budgeting it. We believe that next year will be an ad year. We're going to be close to the playoffs, if not on our way to making the playoffs. We're going to keep budget to add players. We are going to add a free agent pitcher. We need a free agent pitcher to complement these bats. We're going to do that in year 1 and year 3. This is a 4-year window. We're not going to make a decision on any long-term deals. Let it play out. All of this, it's strategized and discussed before. It's why being in the front office is way harder than people think. You're not just sitting around playing fantasy baseball. And I'm not trying to give myself flowers here. There's just a whole world of difference between what we think about, what we talk about, the order in which we do things versus what the fans do. Fans are upset right now. You're upset with Atkins, your GM. I get it. But have you seen what Atkins and Shapiro have done? How come there's no mention of all the free agent signings? How come there's no mention of all the pitching you've signed? How come there's no mention of the adding that you've done? It just hasn't worked. It gives me flashbacks of angst and anger, not getting credit or being maligned for trying and then it failing. Oh, you stink. Oh, you didn't try. You're worse. Under that theory, under the theory of this question and others, 29 teams are subject to emails saying, hey, you stink, every year. That just doesn't seem to be fair to me. Now, the Blue Jays are in an interesting spot. They expected the Orioles to be ahead of them. I don't know that they expected the Yankees to be what the Yankees are doing, especially without Garrett Cole. I do not think that they expected their offense to struggle this much. I do not think they expected their pitching, including Alek Manoah, to continue to be this bad. You wonder why I chose against Alek Manoah tonight, because he's inconsistent and generally stinky. Now, the reason we're getting 145 on the pick of the day is that it's the White Sox. So I have a suggestion for my friends up north. I want you to put yourself inside Mark Shapiro's brain, inside Atkins' head, as they're evaluating the team, as they're thinking about the team. What do you think is their first call? I may have discussed this on Blair and Barker. The first thing they're doing is they're talking to Rodgers. They're talking to their owner. And they're saying, honestly, we're disappointed. We absolutely understand that you're angry. We may suggest a managerial change. Get rid of Schneider, bring in Mattingly. But meanwhile, I want you to let us know how much money you're giving us to add to this team. Well, Mark, I can't imagine why we'd add to a team that hasn't proven it should be added to. I love where your head's at, Mr. Rodgers. But do me a favor, put on your sweater and please stay right there on the stairs next to the closet. And let me tell you that this is a team that we did not evaluate incorrectly. This is a team that is going to turn it around, and we need a little, just a little psst. Let us make a good trading deadline deal. How long do we wait? Says Mr. Rodgers. NML, baby. Not much longer. Every day that passes, we are now about to start June. I don't know how close we are to June. When is June? Friday? Today's Wednesday the 29th? No, June is 1st is Saturday. Starting the show on Monday, June 3rd, I get to tell you, hey, we're at the beginning of the middle. because the first 2 months are over. When you're done with a third of the season, it ain't early no more. The other part of your question that interested me is something that we do talk about a lot internally, which is the motivation for your employees to do you right. And I don't mean you, the fans, I mean us in the ownership group and team president. When a GM is at the end of a deal, what is their motivation to not win now? GMs don't get paid. Here's a little note. I absolutely understand why you'd have the wrong impression with all of the people you've never heard of getting GM jobs. Peter Bendix, even when Chaim Bloom got his chief baseball officer job. When you promote an assistant GM, Chris Getz in Chicago, when you take someone and swipe them out of the analytics department, teams do this and they say, hey, we want a new way of looking at the game. We want someone who can, remember what Jerry Reinsdorf said, we didn't want to go out house. We wanted someone who could know our team, so they didn't take a year to evaluate it. That's such a crock of crap. The reason why you hire Chris Getz or a Peter Bendix is you don't have to pay them as much as an established winning general manager. You get to pay them what a first-year GM makes. And with GM salaries so crazy with Andrew Friedman and what Theo used to make, when managers like Counselor are making 8, GMs are making 10, David Stearns in New York. There are owners who say it's ridiculous. Let's bring in a new guy and give him, $1 million. I totally understand why teams would do that. But when you're evaluating who to bring in, what we say from a PR standpoint is when we present our new GM, what we say is this person has the vision, and his talking point is I'm here to make this a competitive team year in and year out and return our team to the glory and the winning rings that have been lacking for so long. Blue Jays since 92, 93, Marlins since 03, Mets since 86. These talking points are in every handbook when a new GM takes over. If you look at GM press conferences, they all say the same thing. The reason I like giving GMs long-term deals is I want them to be understanding that they can do something to make us good for a long period of time. Take a look at what Jeff Luhnow did before getting kicked out of the game. Take a look at what Theo did before leaving Chicago in ruins. They were willing to lose for a big number of years because they had contractual security that allowed them to lose for a big couple of years. And then they were there when it was winning time again. The Blue Jays are in a position where Rodgers, as a corporate owner, may never allow a full rebuild, which would mean that you'll be mired in mediocrity for decades more to come. Or they could approve a full rebuild. You cut the payroll, make a little extra money if possible, and give Atkins a contract extension or hire the new guy immediately to start the process. I don't want Atkins to be as a lame duck when his contract is ending just in a couple of years, because any sort of full rebuild takes longer. And if you're not rebuilding, then I want Atkins in front of the media telling me, hey, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're upset, but let me tell you, we spoke to our owner. We are not starting over. That is a great message to give. You just have to mean it. Is it possible the Blue Jays will never rebuild? Is it possible they believe that they've got the talent to not be mediocre despite all evidence to the contrary this year and in years past? They are the most fascinating team to watch, without a doubt. I appreciate your question. Keep them coming. Okay. I didn't mean to say okay. I'm going to do this quietly. 4869. Yesterday, there was an announcement made that Major League Baseball records will now be changing and Negro League stats will now be incorporated for the first time. This is an announcement that came during COVID, actually, sometime in 2020, that they are going to correct an oversight, was I think the way they put it. Let me go back. If you live in Kansas City or go to Kansas City, the Negro League Museum opened in 1990. I was honored to get a tour of the museum when we played the Royals. Go to that museum. It's outstanding. I mean, Kansas City as a city's outstanding. Go learn about the Negro Leagues. It's fascinating. You know the story of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in 1947. You know when he became the first African-American, the first black player. You know Larry Doby, I believe, was the first black player in the American League, maybe a year later. You know the racism that was pervasive in our country. You know that it continued. We did the story on Hank Aaron and the nightmare of his home run chase, breaking Babe Ruth's record for most career home runs and what that was like for him. You may not know about all of the Negro Leagues that existed. There were different divisions. There were different types of Negro Leagues going on for decades. The most successful of which was the latest incarnation, which had Satchel Paige and others. Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson's a name you're going to hear. I don't know if you know this. Josh Gibson is now the career leader in average, slugging, and OPS. Josh Gibson is now ahead of Ty Cobb in the record books for the highest lifetime batting average. Josh Gibson is now ahead of Babe Ruth in slugging percentage and OPS. And the question that I am being asked today, and it's a simple question that I asked myself as I was reading this. I knew this was coming. We talked about this when I was in the game. We talked about how do we get more African-American participation? What do we do to be more inclusive? What do we do? What are the talking points? Do we just say, stop it? We have an overwhelming number of minorities. They're just Hispanic, not black. And it was told to us by focus groups and by people we paid to be consultants. That's a good gig if Samson and Coca can get it. That black people do not consider having Hispanic people as checking the diversity box. They want black players in baseball. And guess what? So did the owners. The more good players that you have from every ethnic group, every race, every religion, every color, the better it is. Because the theory is, that's why we always wanted an Indian player in big league baseball, for crying out loud. We did a whole thing trying to get an Indian player to make the big leagues. Love to have players when they come in, not just be from Cuba, Dominican, and Venezuela. There's a lot of money to be made. When we had we had a guy named Rick Vandenherk. He was Amsterdamian, and it was big for baseball. They said, all right, maybe we'll play some games there. And then it turned out he wasn't good enough to be the anchor tenant. You need someone who's the anchor in order to expand. But baseball, I've been talking about the Negro Leagues really my entire career. Bud Selig is someone who started this conversation. Rob Manfred, someone who finished it. And the conversation was simple. It was, why don't we? That was the question presented to us on a committee. Why don't we count Negro League stats? And of course, the answer was given, well, are we sure? Do we know exactly? Not in a racial way, but are we sure about these stats? As sure as we are, someone pointed out, we're not that sure even about the old-time stats with the white players. Yeah, but don't you think that we're pretty clear about what happened with the 27 Yankees? I think we are, but maybe not totally clear. Do we know for sure who Josh Gibson was playing against? Because when you learn about the Negro Leagues, there was a very strange schedule. Who they would play, what would be a sanctioned game, a non-sanctioned game. Sometimes there were women involved in games. Leagues were folding left and right and changing. It's sort of like indoor football now. A lot of changes. But we independently verified it, and MLB said. And we can tell you for certain that Josh Gibson batted .372. Raise your hand on this committee if you are not in favor of incorporating Negro League stats. Nobody raised his hand because that would have been leaked out and we would have looked racist. We would have looked as though that we are trying to ignore the history. I'm not going to say we were strong-armed. I'm just going to say that it wasn't much of a vote. It was more of a coronation. And back then, I never thought, and this is not privilege, really. This is me evaluating a business situation and trying to understand that some things are done for optics that are not done because they're not very practical, and they can lead to a result where you're making a few fans happy or making a few fans unhappy. Do you know how many white racists are going to be on social media saying that they don't want to recognize Josh Gibson or any Negro League stats? Of course there are. But baseball's view is they'll be way more embracing by the Black community, and that will overshadow all the people who leave us because they think we're too woke. The decision to include Negro League stats is not based on anything other than the way our country is right now and the way leagues want to look as though they are inclusive. You put something on the helmets if you're Roger Goodell, give me a break. You paint the end zone, give me a break. Baseball is actually doing stuff. Michael Hill, our former president of baseball ops, shout out to him. He started a program where you want to see more Blacks in the front office, then you got to get them in line. So there's a program that he started that is getting African Americans jobs in front offices and helping them ramp up and be superior, because at the end of the day, GMs aren't going to hire you just because of a color. They're going to hire you because they think you can get them another win and you can do their job for them. So MLB started a program where you're teaching people practically how do you get a job in baseball? What are you going to be doing once you get that job? And I am all in. I love it. I have no problem, even though the demographic I'm in, the age, etc., being pushed out. Fine, not me. You're going to have to take me kicking and screaming, baby. But I absolutely am fine with improving the pipeline, more opportunities, front office, getting young kids to play baseball in African-American communities, which baseball does, having them grow up to be either fans or players. I'm in. It's smart business. But sometimes things go too far. Understanding the significance of this conversation. The reason I'm not in favor of incorporating the Negro League stats into Major League Baseball stats has nothing to do with the fact that it's the Negro League at all. It has to do, for me, that what a dangerous game that we're playing. Because what about a European league or a Native American league or a Jewish summer league? Why wouldn't those stats somehow be Major League stats? We're focused on the top of the board. Josh Gibson and all the records he has. By incorporating the stats, you got to find the guy that got one at-bat, Adam Greenberg, because that one at-bat in the Negro Leagues, that's now one at-bat in the big leagues, and that becomes part of MLB's history. That's a stat. One at-bat, it counts. So now we are in a position where we are incorporating what is only the beginning, I assume, of different leagues from different time periods. Because we can't be seen as only catering to one group. That doesn't seem right. So wait to see. More changes coming. All right, let's take a break. Do I have a movie to review? And then Oakland A's fans out there, and we know there are a lot of you, I got an update. I want to talk about an article that appeared in the LA Times. I want to try to explain what's happening with the A's deal, give you a little update on that right after the break. Welcome back to Nothing Personal. How are we doing today? It's David Samson coming at you. You can see us live every day at 8 a.m. Nothing Personal with David Samson. Hit the subscribe button. Go to DraftKings Network. Thank you, DraftKings. 10 a.m. Chaque jour every day. Of course, we have a website, davidsamsonpodcast.com. Coco, will at some point you throw up the tour shirt? Because we are back on tour. Going to St. Louis and Chicago. Watch a movie every day. You know this. I want to apologize to J-Lo. Not that you want to hear my apology, but I'm going to try. You know how much I enjoy spending time with you. Look at me, Louie. You know how much I've enjoyed getting to know you and how much fun me, you, and Mark used to have. But that said, Atlas may be the worst movie I've ever seen. I watched it. I'll watch anything you do. But when you're making the movie, I mean, you're a badass, I guess, but how about I send people to watch Out of Sight instead or Made in Manhattan instead? I don't want them seeing this movie. Yes, it's streaming. It's on Netflix. Oh my God, it's bad. It's about this world where we're far in the future. Sterling K. Brown from This Is Us is in the movie as well. They've got to somehow kill the guy from Barbie, one of the Kens of Barbie, who it's all about AI. So instead of reviewing the movie, which stinks, I would like you to definitely give thought. It's like iRobot, but worse. Give thought to AI and what your fears are, how you use it. Have you noticed Google Coca does AI overviews of what you're Googling and it condenses it and it gives you, you don't have to look at articles anymore. You're now looking at the summary from AI of every article that discusses what you're Googling. And I'm here for it. Anything that saves me time, loving it. Is it possible that there could be bad AIs where the eyes turn red and all of a sudden they're not helping you? It could. I mean, for crying out loud, airplane doors are falling off. Give me a smart movie to talk about it, and I'm in. Give me Atlas, and I am OUTTT. Skip it. The Oakland A's continue to make headlines. Some of them on the field. Will they trade Mason Miller? Will they not? Are they overperforming? Are they not? How's their attendance? Most of it is off the field. How's the relocation going? We did a segment the other day about the non-relocation agreement, the draft of the non-relocation agreement. And I got a phone call from an old friend. We used to be real close. Did a stand-up routine in LA. And there was an article that came out about the targeted tax. And I wanted to talk about it. You can read this article in the LA Times by Bill Shaken. Yes, that was a Billy Joel lyric reference. You're welcome. And it was an article about a provision which talks about the fact that if a targeted tax is ever levied against the Oakland A's, then the Oakland A's can make the non-relocation agreement null and void, therefore being able to leave Vegas. And there are people up in arms about this, except for the people negotiating the deal. A targeted tax is a tax that applies only to that which you are engaged in. So, example, a ticket sold in a ballpark in Vegas. If you sell a ticket in that ballpark, then there's a $2 surcharge. That's a targeted tax. Anyone who buys hot dogs between the hour of 7:05 and 10:05 on the corner where the Tropicana used to be, that will have a 69-cent surcharge. That's a targeted tax. When you negotiate stadium deals, you put in there that you will not be subject to targeted taxes. The public then says, we can't tell you what we're going to tax. You can't take away our right to tax. And I said, while negotiating my deal, no problem. If there's a targeted tax, we will submit our receipt of what we paid, and we are getting a rent abatement. We owe you $3.5 million a year. We're not going to pay your rent. And if the targeted tax is more than $3.5 million, then we're not going to put money into the CapEx fund. You are. Totally reasonable. Was the easiest part of the negotiation. Because the view of the public was, well, we're not going to do a targeted tax. And my view was, I don't care about you. You may not get reelected. We have a lease that lasts 30 years. There's a chance that there's someone not even born yet, hasn't even been conceived, that will lead a legislature in the future to impose a targeted tax on my team, and we've got to have it in writing right now. What we do, how we're made whole. Very, very standard. Normal. Smart. But the question is that if there's a targeted tax in Vegas, will the A's leave Vegas? Will they exercise the out clause? Listen to me now and hear me later. No, I promise you. No matter how much the A's fail in Vegas, well, and if they are failing, there wouldn't be a targeted tax. But let's say they're hugely succeeding, and then there's a targeted tax. Oakland is not going to say, you know what, things are so good in Vegas, we're going to leave because of this targeted tax. It's just a negotiation, but it's going to be dealt with in the final agreement. What struck me about Bill's article in the LA Times is he found someone, and I absolutely love Marquette, love Milwaukee, but he said that's not a normal clause in these things. And he's an expert in non-relocation agreements. I've never heard of him, Martin Greenberg. Well, we didn't hire him to negotiate ours. And every deal I've seen, it's addressed. Now, if he's talking about it's not normal to allow an out of your non-relocation agreement, doesn't even matter. That's not helping inform your class, your students, or my audience. Because let's pretend you can get out of a non-relocation agreement. What about your lease agreement? What about your development agreement? Well, the building's built. You're operating under a lease agreement. You got to put a lease provision in there that says if there's no non-relocation agreement, then this lease becomes null and void. But if not, you're subject to the lease. Does the lease trump the non-relo agreement? Depends how it's written. Are you getting what I'm saying? Everything works together in these agreements. We've only seen a draft of the non-relocation agreement. We have to see the lease agreement. We have to see the development agreement. We have to see the finalized non-relo agreement. Then you have to read them as one. You read each because they're provisions that will actually refer to other provisions in other of the agreements. You have to read them as a whole. Right now, we're in the dock. We don't know squat about crap. So I think it's very bizarre to have any sort of comment at all about the non-reload draft because we don't know whether the draft will be what it is in final form or how any interaction will be with other documents. The only thing I can promise you, I guarantee you, is that there will not be a clause that allows for a targeted tax against the A's without a concomitant clause that allows for them to get their money back in some other way. You can bet your bippy on that. You know what else you can bet your bippy on? Scott Boras is near the end. Scott Boras is near the end. Jordan Montgomery, mediocre. Blake Snell stinks. Chapman overpaid. Bellinger back to being bad. Blake Snell had another terrible outing. His ERA is 69.69. And he met the media. He plays for the Giants, in case you didn't know. He got $31 million, then an opt-out. He could opt into another $31 million, I think. He talked about how bad he was. And he said, you know why? I didn't have spring training. I didn't face a big league hitter until I pitched my first game in the big leagues this year. It's too tough. Guess what? Scott Boras tells teams, my guy's ready. Don't you worry. We're in no rush to sign. We're doing our own spring training. He's facing live hitters. He's progressing exactly normally. And to that, we always used to tell him horse hockey. But his players stuck to it. His players were always on message. His players always said, we can come in, sign me late, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. It turns out not so much. The joke is now no longer on the teams who signed these Boras players. The joke has moved fully to Scott because he thinks with Pete Alonso coming up, Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, Max Scherzer, Alex Bregman, he thinks that he's got the greatest free agent crop of all time. He says that every year. Records are going to fall. I'm going to sign the most notional contract dollars. Soto's going to get the biggest contract. I'm going to get Burns what I couldn't get Snell because Burns is a ace. Wait till you hear Boras. Wait till you hear him market Corbin Burns. He will make you think that Montgomery and Snell are yutzes, are 4A pitchers. Of course, last season, it was, hey, you want to win a ring, you bring in Montgomery or Snell. I get it, advocating for his players. I do. But the reason I tell you that the gig is up is that now owners have cover to not deal with Boras. Now GMs have the ability and the proof to say, hey, listen, we're not buying what you're selling anymore. We never understood it, but we buy it because our owner made us. Our owner has now given you the Heisman. He's let me, even though I only have 2 years left on my deal, he's let me decide how I want to deal with overpaying your players. And we're not doing it anymore. And don't give me your notebooks full of crap about how ready your players are. That's what he does. He gives you a full PowerPoint presentation about his player. This is the last piece of your puzzle, San Francisco. You bring him in and he's ready. He doesn't need spring training. He's had it. It turns out Scott was lying the whole time. Every time. Constantly. Here's the change that's going to happen. And I'm so sure it's going to happen that I'm willing to make it an official wait to see. Wait to see when I tell you something's going to happen. If it does, great. If it doesn't, fine. All big name Boras clients will sign before spring training of 25. Book it. And you can write it down. Alonzo, Soto, Burns, Bregman. They will all sign before spring training. Because what teams are going to do, they're going to say, Scott, just so you know, we're not signing this guy. I don't care what the price goes down to. We're not signing these guys in March. It's like filed to trial and arbitration. Don't think we're going to negotiate with you once we exchange numbers. We're going to the room. Sorry, Corbin, that you feel hurt about what we said about you. Sorry, Josh, if you were upset. Sorry to anybody. Although I don't think Hader was actually upset during arbitration. Not what was said. I think he was more upset that the Brewers wouldn't pay him. But that said, this time they mean it. When they say they're not going to sign your guys after spring training starts, call after March 1 at latest, they're not kidding. Your guys are going to have to go to the California Penal League. That's an official wait to see, Coca. I want to end with a quick acknowledgement of something that came out that people are talking about. They're spending time talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars kicker. His name is Brandon McManus, and that there's a lawsuit now from flight attendants over his behavior on a charter, saying that he was sexually assaulting them. And I've been on charters for many years with team planes, and we are very careful the way we act on planes. We are very respectful. We're very clear. I spent every plane ride going to the back of the plane, to the front of the plane. Even though executives are supposed to stay in the front of the plane, I always went to the back of the plane. We always would speak to flight attendants before the season started. We speak to players before the season started. Sexual assault, bad behavior on an airplane. You're not in college anymore, boys. This isn't a frat. These are people doing their job. Let them do their job. You don't want to wear your seatbelt? Your choice. But after Singapore Airlines, I certainly would. You want to play cards? Great. You want to bring on food? Great. You want to bring on a briefcase of alcohol against the rules? Fine. Do it. We had a pitcher whose name is escaping me right now, Coca. Oh, my God. I can picture him. He was a reliever. He had a briefcase that made it look like he was on Wall Street. And when you open the briefcase, it was alcohol with great cups that were padded because you weren't allowed to bring alcohol on the plane. We knew it. We know what players are doing on the plane. And I was good with it. As long as you're not driving when you get home. So anytime we flew to the road game, no problem. But we were very clear with our players. You want groupies, you want to go out, you want to date, you want to cheat, whatever you want to do, we don't do it on the plane. You want to see people off the plane? Do it. We treat the men, the males, the females, everybody with respect. Why? We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want a he said, she said, she said, he said lawsuit, because what it means is we're going to have to pay. So we would be honest with the players. I would like to say that I did it out of the goodness of my heart, because no one should ever behave that way, which is true. No one should ever behave that way. People should be allowed to do their work without worrying about being rubbed up against or being assaulted or in any way disrespected. 100%. But my reason, in addition to that, I don't want these kind of lawsuits because it's just business. We'll be back tomorrow. This is nothing personal.